Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
And I'm Debbie.
We're Jewish.
So we like to kvetch.
I like to complain.
And I like to discuss things.
I grew up with my mom talking about all sorts of stuff. So I thought it would be fun to bring her onto Kvetchfest so we can have more conversations about life, politics, and everything in between.
I'm a boomer.
And I'm a millennial.
Our different perspectives could lead to shared insights, differing opinions, and new realizations about the world, ourselves, and our relationship. Be part of our community as we explore more together in relationship as parent and child.
Complaining can be cathartic, so let's kvetch together. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
I'm Debbie.
And today we're going to talk about and maybe unpack the question, does success equal money? I think we all have an ideal that we want to reach a certain monetary amount in our lives to have financial freedom or to just not be stressed about money and bills and all of that. And a lot of our society is based around having money, and that is what success looks like. But is that the reality? How do we measure ourselves, and how do we step outside of that ideology of success equaling money? And under capitalism, everything kind of compares itself to capitalism, to how much money you're making, to with the things you own, to the houses you buy or the house you can't buy, or the things you can't have access to, because, well, there's a lot of reasons. And I was just reading, or not reading, but I just watched a video about the federal minimum wage and how the appointed Treasury Secretary, what's his name, appointed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say it. There's
Dumbledore?
No.
Well, that can't say it in Harry Potter.
Yeah. Well, I can't say it.
Okay. No, but okay. We can say the Harry Potter. No, we can't say that name either. Okay, never mind.
It was a joke because it's Voldemort, and it was he who must not be named.
Close.
But there's a whole. This is such a tangent, but Harry Potter is now. I mean, it's a beloved thing, but that's a whole other topic that we should talk about with J.K. Rowling and her being just a transphobic SOB.
I'm so sad about that, honestly.
I'm sad too. I mean, yeah. Well, that's
yeah. What happens to billionaires?
That should be the episode title, actually.
What happens to billionaires?
What happens? They just get so far removed from actual society that they just want to cause a ruckus. And that's the other thing, is money gets to their heads, right? It changes people, I think, once you have access to, some people, sure. I'm generalizing.
Some people feel like they're imposters and they don't deserve it, or they don't realize what their buying power is, or, I mean, there's a lot of, it's a spectrum like everything else. But yeah, I just wonder, I mean, I remember people saying when I was growing up, you have to remember where you came from.
Right.
So you don't get, like you just said, too far removed.
Well, anyway. What's that song that J-Lo does? I'm still Jenny from the block. But
yeah, well,
are you?
What block are we talking about?
Yeah. I think you've moved about 20 blocks from.
She never says I'm still Jenny. She never tells what the block is.
Right.
Right. No, it's funny that you should mention her, because I was telling my husband, we were watching something, a preview of something. I said, I just can't watch J-Lo when she's a maid or some teacher or even private detective, whatever it is. I just can't. I can't remove her level of success from being just an average Joe.
Totally.
That might really, she might really, if I knew her and we were here right now talking, she might say that's really short-sighted of me. And I would be happy to hear that, her point of view about that. But for me, as a consumer of movies and things, it's hard for me to remove her from the great success that she's had.
Well, yeah. And I think, the LA fires are going on right now. I think there's a lot of a transparency and maybe a peek into what actors and artists' lives actually look like. And yes, there are highfalutin actors who make a lot of money and don't need the next gig and then also actors who have businesses that are very successful in makeup and all of that, and they might not need another acting gig. But then you have very real working actors who have worked their way to being able to afford a place in Los Angeles, and they're still fighting to maintain that lifestyle out there. And it is really hard to see, because when I think about, okay, yeah, this actor who's probably very talented and very good is playing a character who doesn't come from money or doesn't have access to the things that they actually do have access to in real life. It is a little challenging, but I try to, I don't know, it's hard. Art, you want to enjoy the artistry of someone, but then this goes into the question, can you really separate the art from the artist? And that's a whole other topic. So,
Right.
because kind of what we're talking about. So,
I think when our back in the day when actors were under studio systems and had to, and then they couldn't work outside the studio and they had contracts and blah blah blah, and they weren't really free agents, and there was still tabloid and gossip and all that about them. We had a certain idea about them because it was generated for us. But now actors they're people who are working, and they just happen to make a lot of money, and they're out there and they're giving more of themselves and divulging more. But I kind of feel like the less I know, the better I can connect to the character they're playing.
hmm
So I'm thinking while you're talking that there are some actors that I can get behind in certain roles that I don't even think about their level of wealth, but then there are others I do because they're more out there in terms of maybe they act, but they also sing, and maybe they
right,
act, but they also do fashion, and so you see them in so many different facets. It's hard their performance has to be so realistic that you lose your ability to think about them as that person in that moment.
right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I almost feel like the less we know, the better we are in terms of the imaginative process of acting.
Yeah. Social media has really changed that landscape for us, right? I mean, I think the general public feels very connected to actors or any sort of celebrity, or what's the other word for people that are in the public eye, but folks in that sphere. And
Right.
then they feel like, I mean, this past week on people's social media pages with the LA fires and stuff, people are like, "Well, we shouldn't feel bad for celebrities." It's like, well, they're still people. They still
Oh yeah.
lost things. Like, it doesn't
Totally.
matter if you can rebuild or not. It's still a really traumatizing event, and we're all humans trying to navigate this intense time and really
Right.
sad time. So, I don't appreciate when people, obviously I understand it's because, well, and this comes back to this intense wealth disparity in our country, and
Yeah.
who gets access to being able to live in the Pacific Palisades. But then when you think about Altadena, people don't know that it's an historically Black community, and that there's so much diversity in that part of Los Angeles. And yeah, so there's a thing where people just don't, they misplace their anger on celebrities or on people who are in the public eye and have lost everything, and instead, it should be placed on your politicians and your local government and people who are voting against your right to make more than 7.25 an hour in certain states. I mean, that's the federal minimum wage, which impacts every state in the United States. Even though in other places you can get a much higher minimum wage, doesn't mean you can just move. um,
Right.
it doesn't change a lot of things. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack with money. It's so emotional. It's so tied up in everything we do, ethics and morals and success or not, whatever it is. There's so much tied up into how we perceive ourselves within it. And I can speak for myself when I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm really not successful because I've been laid off 4 times and that shouldn't have happened to me. And why does that happen to me? And am I just unlucky, or am I discriminated against, or am I just didn't make the right choices with my college and my graduate school? And like, what did I do wrong? But then I have to remember, like, it's a systemic issue that's not just on me. And I think so many societally, we are taught that it's us to blame. Like, we need to fix the environment by using compostable items, and don't get plastic straws, don't use plastic bags, don't use plastic straws, like recycle and go thrifting. And it puts it all on the consumer, where really it needs to be put on our government and
It does.
our local politicians. And I
Yeah. And businesses.
yeah. And businesses, and I think I have to really actively not internalize my own shame around my career not being quote unquote successful, or feeling like I lost out on the privilege of being in a career that had longevity, then that's a huge privilege that some people get to experience, where they get to be in a career for a long time, and then that builds wealth, right? So when you continuously are having upheavals in your career and stagnating or not being able to build wealth, I mean, then it really gets in your head like, am I successful? Am I not successful? I should not be here at 35. I should have been here by 35. But you have to like realize that also that's a societal thing too. And there's no age where you need to be somewhere. So there's a lot to unpack. It's very overwhelming.
This might be like several segments. When I said businesses, I didn't mean small business. I meant large corporations that can make
Yeah.
a very positive impact on atmospheric issues and employment issues and all that kind of stuff if
Yeah.
they're socially conscious enough to do that. And there are corporations that are, and there are corporations that aren't. And I
Yeah.
understand that they want to make money and they have stockholders, but the whole stockholders thing is impeding the ability for the average employee working for them to create any wealth. And that's
Yeah.
a problem. But you said, whoa, a lot of things. So
I
I wrote
did.
down a bunch of stuff before we started talking or while you were talking a little bit. And I thought, first of all, we have these goal lines that we think we're
Hmm.
supposed to make. So by the time I'm this age, I should have done this. By the time I'm this age, I should have done that. And those are kind of, now that I'm older and I can look back, and I don't want to look back and dismiss anybody younger than me and say that's all poppycock. But had I known earlier on that that was sort of self-imposed because of what society said. I think my mother wouldn't have gotten married at the age of 18 if she wasn't told that women at that age who weren't married were, spinsters and not lovable and not acceptable. Right? I
Hmm.
think she would have waited. Maybe she still would have married my dad, but maybe they would have waited until they were more established and they weren't teenagers starting a life together with very little experience because both of them had lived at home and never anywhere else. So, and I know there are a lot of people during that time period who did just that, and some of it was very successful and some of it wasn't. It's kind of a crapshoot. It's very random.
Hmm.
But I think that people do say, I want to be married by a certain age, I want to have kids by a certain age, and there's biological reasons for women to want to maintain a certain age to have children, all that. But it's very, very difficult. But if you can put those kinds of things aside and just decide for yourself what is important to you
Hmm.
and not what's important to other people outside of you that suggest that it's important to you, and stick to what you think you want, and whether it's creating wealth or not creating wealth or being creative or having more linear way of life. I mean, those of us who were raised in a way where it looked very linear. Most of us
Hmm.
were raised with parents who went to school, got jobs, stayed with those jobs, had children, stayed with their marriages, all that stuff. And
Right.
some of us wound up being children of divorced parents
Yeah.
who still had jobs that were linear, let's
Yeah.
just say.
Yeah.
And some of us entered into marriages that either ended in divorce or death, and our life wasn't as linear as we hoped it would be based on our experience with our parents. So it depends on what you consider linear and how traditional you want to be. And my cat
Hmm.
is meowing in the background. She's only been
It's
sleeping
okay.
for 12 hours. She decided to get up now.
Of course she is.
Um,
She heard us talking.
so I think that the idea that we can count on something being what we thought it was going to be is not something we should count on. If that makes sense.
So the only thing you can count on is change. Is that what I'm
Right.
hearing? Yeah.
And taxes and death.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Such
But what I'm
positive things.
yeah, what I'm saying is because of my own life experience, if I looked at which I did, and I've grown out of that sensibility, if I looked at what happened to my life after I got married and had kids as a reason to feel like I did something wrong, then
Mm,
that's a huge problem, right?
mm,
Because recently I was in a discussion group where I said sometimes our behavior, the things that we have to do or the changes that we have to make are based on somebody else's behavior, right? Or
mm,
somebody else's choices. And generally that's how it is. When you're in a family structure, your reality is based on somebody else's decisions about you, about them, about the family
mhm.
unit. So
Yeah.
you don't have control over that. The only person you have control over is yourself. So if you
Yeah.
wind up if something happens where you're not going in the direction you thought you should go in, or because out external circumstances happened to you that kept you from doing what you thought you were going to do and you have to pivot, that's not because you did anything wrong, unless you were the actual perpetrator. Then you might say, okay, I
Mhm.
decided to end this marriage. I decided to close my business, and now I have to deal with those circumstances. But if you were the by, you know, if what happened to you was a byproduct of somebody else's decision, it has nothing to do with who you are as a person. It has to
Mhm.
do with whatever was imparted onto you and
Right.
what you do with that after the fact,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So in your case, I would change your self-talk into, yeah, I was laid off, but that doesn't have anything to do with my abilities as an employee, my abilities as a creative. Those were just decisions made by somebody outside of me, and they don't really know who I am. Just like
Yeah.
the person who says, don't feel sorry for people who are wealthy who lost their stuff. Yeah, they had a lot more stuff, perhaps, and could have had more freedom to purchase all that. But they also have children and sentimental items. They're just people who, for whatever reasons, have more,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
then there's a lot of reasons why that happens as well.
Mhm.
But so the whole idea of success really, I think it needs to be internalized by the person and what their definition of success is, and not
Yeah.
so much by what everybody else thinks
Yeah.
success is.
I agree. I feel
It's
like for
hard
me
though.
now, it's hard, yeah, because there's all these outside pressures. We have all
Sure.
these different responsibilities as adults and people in the world. And I think I'm trying to shift my paradigm or shift my perspective into successful person is someone who is in their community, has robust relationships in their community, is someone that they other people can come to if they need help, someone who shows up with my relationships in family and in friendships and being a mentor to the young kids in my life. I feel like that is really what's important to me and perhaps is deemed more successful if you can show up in your community and be someone who was really beloved. I think that's I look at people and I admire folks who are instill kind of those values. And I was reading something the other day where it was like list 5 Grammy Award winners or list 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners or listing all or 5 Olympic champions who won gold medals, so and so. And it's like we know all these people because we see them in our world. But then when you get right down to it, can you name those people? Some people can and some people can't. But then the next question is name 2 people in your life who you can count on. Name 3 people in your community who helped you during a hard time. So those are people that are valued and remembered by others. So it kind of shifts the this look at I think much of my life I felt like, oh, I want to be like some we all want to be somebody.
Hmm.
And what but we are already, right?
Right.
We are already somebody to someone. And I think there's a lot of pressure to feel like, but that's not enough. I want to be someone who has a recognizable face, is a well known name in a household, who has won all these awards. And those are great goals. I'm not saying those are bad, but I think we fail to realize just how necessary we are in the communities we live in and how much we already mean to those people around us.
No, I think that's, yeah, very insightful. I mean, I think we all like, I was teasing, we in this discussion group, we were talking about what was easy for us to learn or not learn. What do we consider ourselves good teachers or that kind of stuff in our lives? And I was a teacher, so I, sort of recuse myself from that question a little bit. But I'm right now at my desk. While we're talking, I'm looking at several things that I received as part of my teaching practice. And I used to tell my students that sometimes you want to go after a tangible reward because you see it and you want to have it. So years back, not that long ago, I think it was, I'm looking at it. So 2018, no, 2017, I went to a curriculum council meeting through my district. And I decided I wanted to be helpful in in making decisions about curriculum K through 12. And we were with a group of educators and also principals. And we were given new adoptions to look at and sort of critique them and rank them and that kind of stuff before they were adopted. Or not so much that before they were adopted, but before they were given to other teachers to look at before the adoption, because they also bring them to school sites so teachers can have an input as well. And
Mhm.
that day in particular, one of the members was leaving, was at the end of that particular year on the council, and they got this trophy thing. It's like a glass. And I saw that and I thought, I want that. I totally want that. And
Yeah.
it's not often in my lifetime that I've decided I wanted a tangible thing to show that I had done this, right? And
Right.
so I was on the curriculum council for 2 years, and at the end I got it, and it's on my desk right now. And in my classroom, I put it up in my window. And I used to use that as a sort of like a little
Carrot?
motivator.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
carrot. Yeah, for my students, because I said sometimes it's just a pat on the back is good enough. Sometimes your own self-talk that you did something great is good enough. And
Mhm.
sometimes you actually want a thing. And this
Right.
time I wanted the thing,
Yeah.
right? And I got to have the thing because I decided it wasn't like I was awarded because I did something amazing. I was awarded because I sat for 2 years and fulfilled a commitment.
Right.
And I got to have it
Mhm.
because I fulfilled a commitment.
Right.
And to me, that's reward enough. But having that nice little statue is also nice to have. So for me, I was thinking a bunch of stuff when you were saying success and does it equal money or not equal money or whatever. So a couple of thoughts came to mind. And this is for me, it may resonate with other people. I'm the product of young parents, like I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
young parents of very modest means,
Mhm.
right? And I'm the eldest in the family. So they started to generate a modicum of more financial freedom when I was pretty much out of the house already. So my sister and my brother may have seen a little bit more of a higher lifestyle, but that
Mhm.
only happened after they divorced each other and married other mates. Okay. So while they were married to each other, they never owned their own home together. I grew up in an apartment for a little bit. Then we rented a couple of houses that I lived in. When we went out of state, they rented homes. It wasn't until they acquired different partners that they were able to purchase homes. And I think that's because with my father's case, he had a working full time partner, and that was probably helpful. And with my stepfather, my mother worked, but she didn't work in the same capacity that my stepmother worked, and she was her own business owner. So they were able to do that, and so their level, both on both sides, their level of wealth went up. But I was already out of the house basically, and I didn't get to enjoy
Mhm.
that lifestyle.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm wondering, thinking about that, whether my idea of success is because of having young parents, because being raised like that, and not to say that my needs weren't met, they were. But I
Mhm.
started to realize as I went through school that my parents didn't have as much as my friends' parents had. Not to mention
Mm.
the fact that they were
Mhm.
also a decade younger than a lot of my friends' parents. So they hadn't had the chance to grow into that. By the time they did, I was, like I said, a high school graduate and already in college.
Yeah.
So because I lived in a pretty modest environment, I wonder if that's what has been the reason why I have never really put a lot of importance on a big grand lifestyle.
Yeah.
Some people who are raised like that decide I'm going to have more than this, and
Right.
they actually go about getting more. And I said no, I liked kind of the what I liked about that lifestyle was that the emphasis was not on the things, it was more on the people. So that my parents had a lot of really nice connections with really grounded people who were also creatives, who are academics. And I think being around people like that and being exposed to discussions and things made me I put more value on those things than on the actual paycheck.
Right.
But having said that, I also was raised with, TV, and I saw what people had, and I just assumed that when I got to be older, I was going to have those things.
Yeah.
It didn't occur to me when I was a kid that that wasn't going to be true for me and
Yeah.
that that wasn't going to be easy for me.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get out of school, you start to realize that that's all created on TV, but
Yeah.
you have to actually put the work in
Mhm.
to do that. And not to say that I didn't, because I
You did.
eventually did that.
Yeah.
I
You did.
acquired all of that,
Mhm.
and then lost some of it, and then reacquired it again. But I remember being in high school. So here I am with young parents, and I'm in high school. I think I was in my it could have been it was the summer before my senior year, and I was taking a couple of summer school classes, because in those days you could take summer school classes to get more credits so that you could only take 4 classes your senior year and be on a half day
Nice.
schedule. So we're sitting in this
Ooh.
class, and I don't remember what the class was exactly, but I said something. I remember we were all facing each other. The desks were facing each other. There was an aisle in the middle of the room, and the teacher was at the side of the room in front of that aisle. And I said, we were talking about money. We were probably talking about something like this. And I said something about sufficient money.
Mm.
Now, look, I'm 17. Okay. So I said something about wanting sufficient money, but I didn't put a value on what sufficiency meant. But
Right.
this other student across the way, who I had gone to school with pretty much my whole life, kind of barked back at me and said, "What does that mean? What do you mean sufficient money?" And I think in my mind, what I meant was, and I think maybe I mentioned it to them, was that as long as you have your primal needs met, that might be what I thought was sufficient money. But I was
Mm.
also a kid, and I didn't
Mhm.
know all the things my parents were responsible for financially. I
Yeah.
only knew what I was coming from and what I
Mhm.
saw. So I remember going to my dad and talking to him about that. And he
Mm.
thought it was amazing what I said.
Oh.
And he told me over the years that he had often thought about my comment about sufficient money to sort of allay his anxieties about how much drive he needed to have in order to have the things that he wanted. I'm not saying he perfected that, because I think my father wanted a lot more,
Mhm.
but didn't always. He made a good living, but I don't think he made the kind of living that would have propelled him into all the things that he really wanted to have. But I
Mhm.
remember him sort of valuing my idea of sufficient money, even though I couldn't tell you what that really is even to this day, because what's sufficient for me and sufficient for you or somebody else is completely different
Different. Yeah.
things, right?
Right.
So I think for me, I've always been a moderate person, and I've always sort of more gravitated to education and intangibles. Not to say I don't have tchotchkes, because I
Like,
do,
yeah, or
but
like experiences.
right, right.
Mhm.
And not really worried so much. Now I am, which is really weird. I'm not worried about tangibles. I'm worried about travel. Like, I haven't done enough travel, and I'm this old, and a lot of my friends have already been there, done that. And I'm like, am I too old to do this? And so I feel a little creeping sense of resentment come up, because
Mhm.
I didn't have the ability to do that when I was younger. I was focused on a business and kids and all that. And
Yeah.
now I have time, and now I'm like, do I have the inclination? So
Mm.
that's more what I'm thinking of now.
Right.
So I think that you're right. I think for me it was not even experiences necessarily a paid for experience, but just I remember, I know I'm ranting a little bit, but I just want to get this, and then we'll talk more about the success part of it. But I remember going with my mom to pick up my sister from school on a weekday, and like 2ish, 2 o'clock ish. And I don't know why I wasn't at work that day, but I didn't have children yet. But
Mhm.
I thought, this is the coolest lifestyle ever. You're at home, you're doing your whatever you're doing at home, and
Mhm.
then you get to leave the house and go pick up your kids. And then you get to come back and do what you do with your kids. And the idea of having those connections and having those experiences with your kids, whether you take them, like my mom used to take us to the park or a museum after school, or maybe for a snack, because she had that freedom throughout the course of both marriages, she had that kind of freedom and
Mhm.
more traditional mothering than a lot
Gender
of mothers.
roles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I thought, this is what I want.
Mm.
And I didn't work the entire time you guys were growing up, but like I was able to work at home, not outside the home, for the first at least 5 or so years. I think it was probably a good 10 years. I think I did that before I
Mm.
actually went somewhere. to work. And maybe I have my math wrong. But to me, that seemed like something I wanted to do.
I know. I share that feeling.
Right. Right.
It feels like the only way to successfully have a family these days too, where it's
Right.
like, and I think that's my big impetus to have my own business is because I'm like, I don't want to be on someone else's schedule. I want to be able to either be home with a kid or travel when I want to, or be able to do that errand because my other partner is work. My partner,
The other person, maybe you were
just
going
the
to
only other person. Yeah.
say.
Sounded funny. Yeah, my partner is like working and they can't get to it, or it's just a nice thing for me to do. I don't know. I maybe it's because of, I'm thinking maybe I'm probably neurodivergent, very undiagnosed ADHD. Who knows? I'm going to look into that for myself. But this idea around a 9 to 5 just like gives me severe dread. But also, I want consistency too. But I think I thrive when I have the choice, which I think so many people want. But it
Oh,
goes
yeah.
back to like, yes, and this is something I recently learned, this idea of financial freedom. Okay, getting to a
Right.
point where you're making enough money where you're not stressed about bills and you can make choices with your money versus just spending it on your, like you said, survival or sufficient just to pay your bills. And I think for so long, I've had moments where I've been able to do more with my money because I've gotten paid more and I've had consistent income. And then that all goes away and you're back to square one. You have to very quickly parse out things that are not important so you can just pay your rent and pay your bills. But it's like that's so devastating because it's so hard to live in that kind of stressful state where you only have enough money. And even if, and you might not, because even if you have enough money just to pay your bills, that likely means you're still going to be in debt in some way, shape, or form. If there's like a catastrophe or an emergency or something like that, that's going to beg for more money in your life. And I think so many of us want just to have peace of mind because living under capitalism requires having money to survive. And it's so sad when people don't have access to choices, and that's all we want, is to be able to have this idea of choice and being free to choose how we spend our time and the money we have. I think there's so much to talk about here. I
Yeah.
would so relate to you about, obviously being a stay-at-home parent is really hard work. It's unpaid labor.
Mhm.
There's no money from the government. There's no help from our government when it comes to child care expenses. I mean, it's very rare to get help with child care. We have a really high mortality rate when it comes to people who are pregnant and giving birth and like all of that. We just don't have a good system here in the United States. And coupled with the fact that it just costs a lot of money to have a family. And I think that delays people like me who are millennials and didn't realize, I think we did everything right. Like we were told to go to college, that was going to give us a good career. Well, that didn't work. Then you're told to get a second degree because that's what's going to really get you your career, and that still doesn't work. You still can't work in nonprofit sector or teaching profession or corporate world. So where does that leave you to become a business owner? Well, that's really slow and challenging and it's not guaranteed. But then layoffs happen for people, and so we millennials were sold a story that then didn't shape up into being the actuality. And I think that's why so many of us are disillusioned and disappointed. And but the blame is still on us that we didn't do something right when really it was just a lot of failed politicians and your generation fucking it up. No, I'm kidding.
And the
Just
economics
kidding.
of 2008.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no,
I didn't know it was going to be so hard to be an adult. Of course you don't know that when you're
I
when
didn't
you're
tell you
like,
that.
no, you left a lot out, mom, okay?
Dang.
You were like, "Go follow your dreams." No, I'm really glad you said that to me because I don't regret having a theater and dance degree with a minor in education and then a master's in sociology. Okay, I don't mind that. Like that's not, or political science. You can do a lot with those degrees, as I have done. I've done so many things. And I'm so grateful because hey, when the corporate world laid me off, guess what? Now I get to work in education. So I did save myself in that way by being so interested in a lot of different things and by being good at a lot of different things. I'm going to toot my own horn here because we should toot our own horns more. But yeah, I think I didn't understand, I don't think, and I especially didn't understand when I was going through the layoffs how difficult. Like, I mean, it's been 2 years now for me with unstable income. That should not be allowed. That should be illegal. There shouldn't be situations where people are laid off and cannot find work. What kind of world is that? That like capitalism is creating this like scarcity mindset that actually just not does not exist, and it shouldn't exist. But that's where we are, and thousands of people are where I am, and thousands in the United States alone and all over the world, and for all different reasons. And I'm talking in a very specific way here about my experience. I just, yeah, didn't realize how challenging it was going to be to be financially stable and set up. It's some of the hardest stuff that I think I've gone through, and the people that are close to me have gone through with me.
Yeah, it's a crapshoot on either way, because if you decide to be your own boss, or like we were franchisees to a franchisor, the onus is still on you, and so you're the
Mhm.
last person. You pay everybody before you pay yourself. I remember when I went into education after owning a restaurant, I felt so relieved that I didn't have to worry about whether or not that was the week I was going to have a plumbing debacle and I was going to have to hold my paycheck back a little bit because I wanted to make sure all my employees got paid, or the insurance premiums went up or whatever. I just felt a sense of relief that I wasn't responsible for the paycheck that was going to be given to me at the end of the month,
Yeah.
that I knew it was going to be fine and I was going to get paid.
Right.
And so there are times as a business owner that you put yourself way at the low end of the totem pole so that you can satisfy your vendors, your employees, everybody else. And to
Hmm.
me, that's the way it should be, because you have people working for you. They have a right to get paid. So anything you decide to do to make money is on a spectrum for success. It just depends
Yeah.
on how much you're willing to sacrifice for that amount of success, right?
Mm.
And how hard you want to work for that success. Because some people get paid extraordinarily well for doing very little work, and some people get paid extraordinarily well for doing so much work that they even question whether or not it's worth the
Right.
for the amount of stress that they're under. So, we
Yeah,
all
and
make
then
our
some people, like your profession, get paid so poorly for so much work and everything. I mean, there's so many, and I don't mean to cut you off, but
no,
I mean, I think there's also this little caveat where everything is skilled labor, and people who are complaining about folks who work in fast food that they shouldn't be earning $15 an hour. Okay, so are you just not going to go to fast food then? Someone has to perform that service.
right.
So you're saying already that you don't respect people in certain sectors, and that's classism. I mean, that's
True.
yeah.
And it's what's interesting about that whole argument is that those people who are pissed that these people are making 15, 17, even some of them are making over $20 an hour now. They're the same ones who complain when orders get effed up or they don't get their
Right.
food on time, or because I was in that business with young people who
Yeah.
were trying to navigate something in their ear while they were doing, you're multitasking
Yeah.
the whole time you're doing this, and that's stressful in itself. And then you have a
Mhm.
person in front of you who you don't know what their demeanor is going to be like when they walk into the restaurant. And so when you say unskilled, okay, but you're trained, you're
Right.
skilled for that particular entity at that
Yeah.
particular time. And as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned, that's a good skill set to have, because so many
Yes.
things are happening at the same time. I was in a fast food restaurant the other day because this particular fast food restaurant is the only fast food restaurant that has continued to have salad. Well, I went into a nearby place and I got a salad, and I decided I was going to eat it in the place. So I'm in there, and there's not too many people in there because there's a lot of people coming through the drive-through, and everybody's doing what they need to do. And this one employee who was manning the front is also manning part of the kitchen,
Yeah.
right? And the
Yeah.
manager's floating, and she's also connected. And I walked in, I placed my order. You can place your order now on a kiosk. You go up to the person, whatever. And I sat down. And a little while later, while I was waiting for my order, two women came in, and they were very nice women.
Mhm.
But when the person wasn't right there in front of them to take their order, they started yelling into the kitchen. Hello, hello. And I
Ay.
thought, oh my God,
Oh,
can
it's
you just take
embarrassing.
1 minute and observe the context of what's happening right now? These
Yeah.
are not people who are sitting and gossiping.
No.
They are working
Yeah.
in between customers.
Yeah.
And you just happen to walk in the in-betweenness of that. And
Right.
just have some grace.
Yeah. Have some patience.
Right. I mean,
Take a
okay,
deep breath.
I don't even think it was a minute and a half. Takes that long to look up at the menu board, right? And
Right.
decide what you want to have. So,
Exactly.
right. So we have such, oh my gosh, it's just so much. We have such
So much.
animosity for people.
Mm.
And until you do that job, because I'll tell you what, I don't want to go into a fast food restaurant and have to do that job right now.
No, I
No
know.
way. I
I
would
think
not want
about
to
going
do it.
back and being a barista again, and I'm like,
Right.
I don't think I could do it.
Right.
That was something I did in my 20s, and I had the energy for it. I don't know, it
Right.
just feels, I mean, I would if I had
Sure.
to, but I
Right.
tried to, and I couldn't get, employed by a coffee shop. So it's
You're
competitive out there, okay, in every industry.
because you're overqualified, whatever
Right,
the
so
hell
then I
that
have to
means.
make a dummy resume that doesn't list any of my, it's like,
Right.
"What? This is so weird." You're not
It's
supposed
not
to lie on a resume, so but then everyone out here on recruiter.com is saying like, "Oh, well, you just have to make separate resumes for everything and then just don't add those things. Like, don't add your education, don't add." It's like, ugh, this is so
well, don't be
so
true to yourself. Don't be true to yourself. Negate who you are. I
you know,
don't know if I've
yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I've already said this on one of, but it did come up recently, and if I have, I'm sorry. But I was driving near our house the other day, and I was looking at the houses to the right of me, and some of them had their garage doors open, which is usually not what happens because you usually don't see a soul. Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyway, so the garage door was open. This guy was fiddling in his garage, and I don't know. In that fleeting moment, I thought to myself, all of this housing on this side of my street is all predicated on jobs.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, all
Mm,
the stuff in the garage, this house that he owns, the car that
mhm.
he's driving. I mean, everything is predicated on the job. And
Yeah.
and if that job, God forbid, goes away, it is scary time. And the
Yeah.
fact that we all in a capitalist society, all underneath the surface, or all don't talk about it, and we may not feel
Mhm.
it in a presence that we can actually define, but we all feel that stress w- making sure that we have a paycheck so that we can do all the stuff that we want to do in
Yeah.
order to have an enjoyable life. I think I don't want it to bring it back to this: does success equal money? Does money equal success? It's hard because you have to have money in
Mhm.
order to do some of the things that make you feel successful, even if you want to go take a Pilates class,
I
right?
know.
Right?
Yes. Mhm.
Right. So, but the broader idea for me is that if I could erase the idea of money, because I
Mhm.
really, when I was a kid, I didn't really understand it. I mean, I remember having
Yeah.
a conversation with my dad that I don't understand, this paper thing is worth something.
Yeah. Mhm.
Why? Why do we
Yeah.
actually need it?
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
But and so I think lots of kids think about that. I don't think I was very brainiac about it, but I just wondered because I know that Native Americans used shells and pebbles and all kind of
Right.
jewelry,
Different
all that kind of
things.
stuff. Right. But we all
Yeah.
had some kind of currency,
Right.
and there's financial currency and then there's emotional currency. We could go on. But
Right.
I think for me, and I've what my personality is mostly about is that for me, success is not necessarily money, but it makes life a hell of a lot more convenient because I've
Right.
had money and I haven't had money. Success for me is people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So for me, having people around me, being in relationship, being able to share with people, that to
Yeah.
me is success. And I've
Mhm.
thought about it in a way to mitigate certain things that maybe I'll never do. Like maybe I won't get to the places I want to travel, or maybe I'll get to a few
Mhm.
of them. But then I think to myself, is being in a cafe with the people I love in the city I live in less successful than being in Bali with the people I love in a cafe? I mean, what's the difference?
I know. I know. I'm something about being in your mid-30s is everything feels like it's happening at once, and maybe I'll feel like this throughout the rest of my life, but it's different than your 20s because your 20s is kind of like a launch pad to the rest of your life, and you're like, "Okay, I still have time and I don't have to make those decisions." You're not under like a pressure
Right.
necessarily. At least I wasn't. Now it's like mid-30s, you're like, "Oh my god, I haven't done the traveling I want to do. I haven't made the memories I want to make." Because that's what it's about for me. It's just making memories
Making
with the people I
memories.
love.
Right.
This being on the fence about, okay, to make a choice of having kids and not having kids, what are you going to sacrifice in order to have a family? What are you going to sacrifice in order not to have a family? How are you going to spend your time? traveling in your 40s or raising a family or trying to do both, but how realistic is that? And all these things about, yeah, being financially stable enough to give, if you have kids, the experiences that they want to have and that you want to give them, and then the experiences you want to give yourself, and then also on top of that, in my situation where it's like, oh, did I do all the wrong things? I don't have a career. I don't, I'm not where I want to be. Well, do I make a total complete career shift into something else, and then that costs money? And there's so many layers to this, and it feels like very this time in my life, I know people make all these choices in their 40s and 50s and well later, but this is a specific time in your life where you're on like this kind of cusp of a lot of big decisions and how it affects
Yes.
your
Okay.
life. Yeah. Well, this is why we have a boomer millennial podcast, Mom, because you're going to tell me your opinion, right?
I'm going to say there's the cusps never end.
That's what I figure. Yeah. Damn it.
If you're in
God,
humans,
it's
there's always cusps.
just going to keep going, isn't it?
Yeah, there's always cusp moments.
Cusps.
What
Cups
is
of
that thing?
cusps.
I'm trying to. There's a thing that I can't get the language that what's the word for that? They're not. What is it? It's a
Separated?
math. Yeah, they're not separate. It's a different word.
Separate but equal?
Maybe, well,
No.
in a comment when you can do things together and that you don't have to do things independent of one another.
Oh, it's
Um,
like separately together.
okay, good. So when I had you
Something.
guys, when I went back to school to get my teacher credential, my master's, I was in classes. I was 40, and the kids in the class were 24. And I didn't even articulate that until they brought a birthday cake in for one of the kids. I say kid because 24. And I'm like, holy crap, they must think I'm so old in this class. Nobody ever said anything, but
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't realize, I just didn't articulate how young they were. So anyway, I did that with an 8-year
Yeah.
old and a 13-year old at home. So
Yeah.
you don't have to just wait until all these things are exclusive of one another.
Exclusive.
Figured it out, right? You can do it in
Yeah.
tandem,
Okay.
right?
Oh,
And
I feel
it
so
might,
relieved.
yeah, it might feel like a pressure cooker
Harder?
while you're going through it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it can also feel very satisfying. And you can also, because like you guys would help me with things, especially with technology until your brother wouldn't. But but he wanted me to figure it out, and I did. Because we're only one person, and because we can only live one life, we have to learn how to multitask our life by
I know.
incorporating different things at the same time.
And would we have to if we didn't live under capitalism? That's always my question, is like, what would it look like? What would success look like without capitalism? All these things that we put on ourselves and on each other.
I don't
I
know how to
feel
answer
like
that.
I don't either, because my idealistic imagining is that I'd get to see you more often and whenever, and that we could go on trips together, and I could spend more time with the loved ones, and I could spend my time hiking, and there wouldn't be this pressure to survive in that way. It would be different somehow. And so the pressure you have to earn a living would be
Right.
replaced by just living.
Right. Yes, I understand it. It sounds sort of romantic in a way,
It's
because
the Pisces in me.
the realist in me, because I'm an idealist, but the realist in me realizes that there has to be some kind of system in order for us to acquire things that we need in order to survive and to be able to do
Yeah.
the things we want to do.
But my feeling is like, if there was universal basic income and a society where people's basic needs met and a little bit more were met all the time for
Right.
their whole lives, then I feel like volunteering would be much bigger than it is now. Because
Well,
today we don't have time for it because we have to earn a living
no, but
and
you're
take care
also
of our own
making
families.
yes, but you're making a large assumption that people in general are magnanimous.
I am, but I also feel like that might be true if we didn't have to survive under these conditions today. Do you know what I mean?
I do, but I'm wondering, there's always going to be people, if we had a system like that, there's
Yeah.
going to be people there are going
Yeah,
to be
they're
people that are going
and
to
they
want
should still
more.
get it. Yeah, well, they're going to want more. They can work more.
Right.
You
Right.
they can still work and earn money. It's just like you
Right.
don't have to.
But they're going to
You can
resent those that aren't, which is what happens with the
Well, it
minimum
happens
wage and
now
all that
though.
crap.
But
Yes.
people should still be able to have a comfortable living regardless of if they're a quote unquote productive member of society, because every life is valuable. But this is a totally other philosophical conversation
Well,
that
yes,
maybe we'll
because
get to in our next
yeah, well,
recording.
yeah, well, I'm going to say one thing and then we'll put a pin in that and then we can come back to it another time. But I would say that's kind of why I would like to be borderless. I think the earth should be borderless. And it's
Yes.
something that we talked a lot about in my fourth grade classroom. What would that look like if
Right.
people could just come and go as they pleased
Right.
without paperwork and all that? And then, but my students being, kind of astute in many ways at 9 and 10, they were saying things like, well, how do we keep bad people out? And I said, I
Yep.
realize that we have situations where we have people who have, broken the law or aren't, or people who should not be matriculating in society. What do we do? And
Right.
so there we create, that's another situation where you can't have anything 100% a certain
No.
way because
And
we have humans that are on a spectrum as well within that
exactly.
system.
Exactly. And if we know anything, a lot of the times bad people come from inside the house. They're already there, like in the United States.
Oh,
But that's a
absolutely.
whole, it's like,
Right.
yeah,
No, no,
yeah.
no. That's the whole thing. But
But
yes,
yeah,
in terms
I hear
of
you.
success equaling and not equaling money, I think it's both at the same time.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, we have to define what success looks like for us. So maybe to our listeners out there, what does success look like for you?
Right. And how might it change as you get older?
Mm,
You get maybe not even older, just wiser within the time within your young years.
right.
And what are the pursuits that are important to you? And I did write something down because I read an article about Arnold Schwarzenegger because he wrote a book, apparently, about what happiness is. And what happiness is for him is being busy. But I remember I remember where I lived. So, and I think my brother was born, so I must have been 8. I remember saying to my mom came into my bedroom because I spent time in my bedroom playing.
Mhm.
And my mom came into my bedroom and she said, "What are you doing?" I said something to her, which she reminded me over the years that I had said at that ripe old age of 8, busy hands are happy hands. Pretty good for an 8-year-old, right? Busy hands
Yeah.
and happy hands. So I
Yeah.
think that throughout my life, I have maybe not said that out loud, but I've internalized that
Yeah.
maybe success for people is just finding things that make them feel good or help other people, which I think
Mhm.
that's mostly that, or is project based because a lot of people like
Mhm.
to go to work because there's projects to do and they
Right.
feel successful and then they also get paid. So it's a
Right.
win-win situation. So I'm not
Sure.
saying I don't want to get paid, but I would like to have a situation where we have more equity
Yes.
with the distribution of money so that
I agree.
everybody can feel some kind of modicum of success for whatever that means for them. And
Love it.
that's what I will say are my final words about that.
And the award goes to
Me, please. I want a statue to look at. Okay.
We'd love to hear from you. Send in your complaints and maybe they'll be featured on the show. On some platforms, you can even leave a voice message, and you can also leave a typed message in the Q&A box on other platforms. So please reach out to us if you want advice, if you have questions. We have episodes out twice monthly, so every other week there's a brand new Kvetchfest episode. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Kvetchfest, where complaining is cathartic. And don't forget, if something's on your chest, kvetch it off.